Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Becky Hampton, and I am pleased to welcome you to the local classroom review session. And this is specifically an overview for local education agencies. We're so glad you joined us, and we're going to spend some time together really addressing our session purpose, which is our purpose is to provide an overview of the local review of classroom instructional materials and really highlighting the key statutory requirements and processes that will support implementation during the 2025-2026 school year. Our objectives are really four key pieces to help our LEAs prepare for local classroom reviews that will begin in the 2025-2026 school year. So number one, we really want to take a look at the SBOE and commissioner rules that are impacting LEA implementation of local classroom reviews. The next thing we want to make sure that we attend to is to summarize the LEA requirements for local classroom reviews. Next, we want to make sure that we're outlining the parent process requirements that should be used during the local classroom reviews. And finally, we want to outline the steps for the parent and district request processes to be used during the local classroom reviews. So we have an ambitious agenda this afternoon as we work to build our understanding of local classroom reviews and prepare for them to launch in the 25-26 school year. But before we begin with that, we really wanted to anchor everyone in answering this question: what is a local classroom review? So let's begin by understanding that the local classroom review came to us from House Bill 1605. And so you can see highlighted to the top right-hand side of the screen there that local classroom reviews were established, funded, and can now be initiated via parent requests. And that we needed an SBOE approval of a grade level rigor rubric to begin the process. So we'll unpack that a little bit more deeply, but really wanted to anchor everyone in what is the review and where is it coming from. Also a reminder, just to anchor our understanding, that after HB 1605, more state support is of course provided, but that instructional materials decisions remain inherently local. So districts have local discretion when selecting instructional materials, and districts also have local discretion to recommend or require, or neither one, the use of certain instructional materials within their classrooms. And they have the authority to choose SBOE approved and non-SBOE approved materials. So let's dive into the local classroom review. So on screen, you can see that to support district and parent visibility into classroom instructional materials quality, HB 1605 required TEA to develop local classroom reviews. And so you can see that this is coming to us from Chapter 31, which is inside of parental rights and responsibilities. But the local classroom review really seeks to answer two questions, which are bolded on screen on numerals 1 and 2. Are the materials that are submitted for the local classroom review corresponding with the materials adopted by the school district or district campus? Second question, are the materials submitted for the local classroom review meeting the level of rigor for that grade level? So those are the two specific questions we are trying to answer in the local classroom review. At a high level, the local classroom review is summarized on screen. So you can see what is the purpose of the evaluation. As I mentioned, that the local classroom review is seeking to answer two key questions. Question one, how consistently are the instructional materials used in the classroom, those adopted by the school or school system? And then number two, how consistently are assignments issued to students on grade level? When we take a look at what's being evaluated, it's really alignment to the district and campus adopted materials and also grade appropriate rigor. It's also important to name here, what is the scope of the review? So we are at a classroom level. We are also what materials are going to be evaluated in the local classroom review. And it is blank student assignments. We'll unpack that more deeply later, but just at a high level, we're at a classroom and a blank student assignment level. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, who is going to conduct the evaluation? Who is going to complete the local classroom review? We have TEA certified reviewers from ESCs or approved vendors to complete these reviews. In terms of when can these evaluations occur, the statewide submission window is going to begin on September 1, 2025, and it extends through the last instructional day for students. The last question for the local classroom reviews, how is it going to be reported? So we are going to report the answers to the two key questions of the local classroom review in a written local classroom review report, which you'll see examples of later on in the presentation. But at a high level, we're evaluating blank student assignments from the classroom to answer two key questions. Are those assignments aligned to what you've adopted in the school system? And are those assignments meeting grade appropriate rigor? Just as an example, what materials are going to be evaluated in the local classroom review? As I said, we're going to be looking at blank student assignments. So on screen, you can see 3 mathematics assignments from 3 different sources. And they're on screen for that particular purpose, to highlight that local classroom reviews can be conducted regardless of the source of the assignment. So wherever the assignments are coming from, we would be able to apply the rubrics to those assignments. The other things featured on the bottom of the screen is the local classroom review is going to apply the rubrics to the blank assignments, but it is also going to collect 1 week worth of lesson material. And those can include teacher guides, student readers, etc. And that's going to be collected and gathered and included in the local classroom report to ensure that we have maximum parental transparency and that our parents have line of sight into what our children are engaging with each day in class. As I mentioned before, the local classroom reviews, to launch, we needed approved rubrics, and those rubrics had to be approved by the SBOE. So on screen, you can see that we were able to secure approval from the SBOE on 4 rubrics. So those are English Language Arts K-3 foundational literacy skills, English Language Arts K-3 reading comprehension, and English Language Arts 4-8 reading comprehension, and mathematics K-12. So we can only conduct a local classroom review in the grade bands and content areas that we have an approved rubric for. So if you see on screen, those 4 rubrics would allow us to conduct a local classroom review in mathematics and in ELAR K-3 and 4-8. One other important highlight about these rubrics for the local classroom reviews is to keep in mind that the local classroom review rubrics were created by the agency using the EMRA rubrics because those were previously adopted by the SBOE. And we adjusted those to focus the criteria on what could be evaluated in student-facing assignments. We wanted to make sure that the local classroom reviews were aligned to the EMRA process without being duplicative. All right. So what we want to do next is take a look at the process requirements to help LEAs prepare for the local classroom reviews in the 25-26 school year. And so on screen, you can see what process requirements related to the local classroom reviews are absolutely essential and important for LEAs to consider. So the first thing that we want to highlight here is that LEAs need to establish a process, for parents to request a local classroom review. To the right-hand side, you can see what those process requirements are. And you can see that the LEA needs to establish the requirements for a parent petition to the school board, including the submission guidelines and timelines. Also, the petitions must be considered at a regular board meeting immediately following submission, provided they meet the deadline. So parent petition details are going to be really, really critical for LEAs as they are facilitating this process with parents. The parent petition details must include the student assignment, grade level, content area, campus name, and teacher name. The other piece we want to highlight here is that LEAs need to establish an appeals process for parents if a petition is denied by the school board of trustees. And those appeal process details must include steps for submitting an appeal, criteria for reviewing the appeal, and timelines for a final decision. So these are coming directly from 67.69 for the local review of classroom instructional materials. The next thing to consider for LEAs to consider in preparation for local classroom reviews in the 25-26 school year is notification to the State Board of Education. So you can see there are actions requested that LEAs notify the State Board of Education members representing the district or the charter school when within 1 week of making the decision to approve a parent requested local classroom review, and within 1 week of receiving the final report for the approved parent requested local classroom review. So let's take a look at this key question for the next section of our presentation. What are the statutory requirements for the local classroom reviews, and how can LEAs prepare to meet these requirements? On screen, you can see process requirements for LEAs to prepare for the 25-26 school year. And there are 6 things that we really want to have as key takeaways. They're summarized on screen, and we will unpack each one individually in just a moment. But let's take a look at the 6 particular process requirements. Number 1, parent request process. So the LEAs need to establish a local process for parents to request a local classroom review. That's going to be absolutely critical. Number 2, the LEAs need to establish minimum requirements for a parent petition to the local school board, including submission guidelines and timelines. The third thing to prepare to launch local classroom reviews in the 25-26 school year is that the LEAs need to establish a parent appeals process if the petition is denied by the school board of trustees. Number 4, also want to highlight here that a school district can request a local classroom review, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then number 5, this is also very critical, that LEAs have to establish a data management process or a way to track requests and teacher participation in local classroom reviews. And we'll talk about why in just a moment. And then number 6, really working to establish a process to share the results of the local classroom review with parents, including publishing results on the district website. So let's engage with each one of these individually in more detail. Beginning with the parent request process. This is going to be the catalyst for the process and what that could look like. So parent requests. The first thing we really want to understand and try to unpack is, why would a local classroom review be requested? And we can really think of 3 potential use cases here from parents about why they would request a local classroom review. The first one being, I want access to what my child is doing in class and what the teacher is using to teach. The second use case, I don't think what my child brought home or did in class is rigorous for their grade or course. And in the third use case, I don't think what my child brought home or did in class is appropriate for the grade or the course. Highlighted on screen, you can see the second use case. I don't think what my child brought home or did in class is rigorous for their grade or course. This is highlighted because this use case directly aligns with the 2 key questions for the local classroom review. The other 2 use cases would be outside the scope of the local classroom review. The next question you might be asking yourself is, how would the local classroom review be requested? So remember, parents are going to be able to request a local classroom review through your specific request process beginning September 1. How will the costs of the approved reviews be covered? Parent requests approved by you, by the school districts, will be prioritized and conducted at no cost to parents and funded through a grant for local classroom reviews. As I mentioned, the results of the review are going to be reported in a local classroom review report and shared on the district website. So on screen, you can see the parental rights and responsibilities from Chapter 26. And I want to focus our attention here on lowercase c at the bottom of the screen. And on that, you can see bolded text that says parents of at least 25% of the students enrolled at a campus. You can also see bolded on screen the word petition. And you can also see bolded on screen, the petition is presented by the parents of less than 50% of the students enrolled at the campus. Those are bolded on the screen because this is a statutory language. And what we're about to share with you is how that language and those percentages, those thresholds, are translated into the parent request process. Want to give everybody a moment to engage with this process map, and we'll unpack it in just a moment, but I'll give you a few seconds to engage with this process map. Okay, so a parent request for the local classroom review. Remember, parents can submit a petition to you at the LEA, and that serves as the trigger for a local classroom review. Remember that the request process for parents is one of the process requirements that you would be establishing at the local level. However, when you look at the process map on screen, it is statutory language represented in the process map. So let's begin over here to the left-hand side, that the parents are going to submit a petition to you according to your local policies. And then you see one of three things is possible in the light gray boxes. Number one, at the top, if parents of more than 50% of the parents submit a petition from that campus, is in the light gray box. This language actually comes directly from the statute on the previous slide. The second scenario is if a parent petition is submitted to you and it's less than 25% of the parents are from that campus, you can see that no review is required. And this is also language that is translated from the statute into the process map. Then at the bottom of the screen, you can see if there are more than 25%, but less than 50% of the parents from the campus submitting the petition, that there is the potential that that petition could be up in front of the local board to take a majority vote on whether or not to conduct the review. So those light gray boxes are represented in the statutory language in this process map. Now, you can also see in these light blue boxes, has there already been a review of this grade or subject at this campus this school year? This is such a critical question because also in statute, we have that a teacher can only participate in a local classroom review one time per year. So they are eligible to participate one time. Really key and critical question to ask. And you can see that it drives activity here on the process map, because if a teacher has already participated in a local classroom review, that no review would be required for that teacher in the same school year in that particular grade or subject. So really want to highlight the importance of the light blue boxes in terms of teacher eligibility to participate in the local classroom reviews. Now that moves us to the second part of our process map, that second yellow circle, that once an LEA approves a parent request for the local classroom review, there are some other key questions that we're going to ask. And one of them is, have those materials been reviewed by EMRA? If your district is using materials that have not been reviewed by EMRA, then what we would do with the local classroom review is we would conduct the review and seek the answers to the two questions. Does what is submitted correspond to what's being adopted in the district? And number two, do those assignments meet grade level rigor? Now you can see if the materials have already been reviewed by EMRA, there's some more questions to ask. If those materials were already approved by SBOE, we would conduct the local classroom review just to see if we are having assignments that are aligned to what's been adopted. However, we already are very well aware the SBOE approved materials have a very highly vetted report about the quality and the rigor of those materials. I also want to highlight here that if the materials were not approved by SBOE or rejected by SBOE, then we would not conduct the review and we would just provide the EMRA report for the off the rejected materials list. So this parent request process is a process map that translates some of the statutory requirements into a process for parent requests. Now, our process requirement number 2 to prepare for LEAs to prepare for the 25-26 school year is the parent petition process. So really what we're looking for here is how the LEAs establish minimum requirements for a parent petition to the local school board, including submission guidelines and timelines. So on screen, you can see where petition shows up in the statutory language. So once again, it shows up in lowercase c, as you can see below, and it talks about those percentages, as we were just mentioning how that's translated into the process. But here are some key components, key considerations for the parent petition for the local classroom review on screen. The first one being that for the purpose of the parent petition for local classroom reviews, a parent means the parent who is listed on the school registration form at the campus. Really critical here. The second thing that I want to encourage us to look at here is the confidentiality of the petition signers and students. It is recommended that each signature and accompanying information be provided individually. So it is up to you, your LEA process might ask parents to submit the request or the petition via your parent portal or your student systems that you use locally. It's up to you, but really want to work hard here to remind all of us to keep confidentiality at the forefront when we're working with these petitions. The parent request submission window begins on September 1 and lasts through the last instructional day. And the reason for this is to ensure that we have equitable access to the local classroom review process across the state. Also, to the top right-hand side of the screen, only one parent signature per enrolled student will be counted by the district in calculating or assuring validity of the petition. And then this is really, really critical here. This taking a look at that the petition must clearly state the grade level, content area, campus, and teacher that should complete the local classroom review process. And the reason for that, just want to stamp this one more time and several more times throughout our time together, is that our teachers can participate in a local review process one time per year for the specific subject or grade level at that campus, one time per year. Also, that the petition should be submitted to the school board president and the district superintendent. So these are 6 critical pieces for the parent petition process for LEAs to consider as they are establishing their process. On screen, there is a parent petition sample that really takes a look at including the student assignment, grade level, content area, campus name, and teacher name for that particular parent petition template. So we will just a very simple form. If your district wishes to include an electronic signature in your local policy, or however that works via your student management system or your parent portals, just do be aware of this particular requirement for the parent petition details to include student assignment, grade level, content area, campus name, and teacher name. Also on screen, just an example of what it could look like for a parent petition to be submitted to the superintendent and for the superintendent to actually certify that the petition meets either the 25% threshold, or pardon me, the less than 25% threshold, the 25 to 50% threshold, or the greater than 50% threshold to either warrant moving forward with the review, or to have it be considered a board meeting for a vote, or to take no review required action on that. So please keep in mind these particular processes, September 1 through the last instructional day for students, and that the petitions must be considered at the regular board meeting immediately following submission. So really important key things for LEAs to consider in the parent petition process. Now, the third process requirement to help LEAs prepare for the 25-26 launch of local classroom reviews is the appeals process. So the appeals process, the LEAs are going to need to establish a process for parents if their petition is denied by the school board. What would that look like? What recourse would they have? What shape could that take? And so when we take a look at parent appeals, you can see, just want to anchor us into the statutory language of where this is coming from. And you can see that bolded on lowercase b2, that the Board of Trustees of the school district can determine if the request will be granted either originally or through an appeals process. So really important just to anchor us here on where the appeals process is coming from. So the parent appeals process, if informal means are not successful, parents could initiate the formal process described below, of course, by complying with your local policies for filing a formal complaint to the district. Of course, level 1 could be engaging with the school or campus principal. Level 2 could be the parents engaging with the superintendent or the designee. And then level 3 could be engaging with the school board of trustees or the charter school board. Of course, if after exhausting levels 1 through 3, the parent is still aggrieved, we would encourage the parent to file an appeal in writing to the Commissioner of Education. You can see to the bottom right of the screen, there is a complaint navigator from the TEA website where that submission could be turned in by the parent. So for number 4, really wanted to highlight here process requirements. The school district itself can request a local classroom review. So let's dive into that a little more deeply. The school district request process. So the school district, what might be 3 use cases of why a school district would want to request the local classroom review? The first one being that you can gain insight to the quality of current instructional materials, or maybe you're considering an adoption process and you need some more data to support that particular endeavor with your stakeholders. The second use case is to obtain data on the implementation of your current materials to determine what might be needed next. The third use case for districts to request a local classroom review might be to proactively address parent concerns and minimize the opportunity for ad hoc review requests. So remember, teachers are eligible to participate in the process 1 time per school year if they participate in a district-wide request. Later on, if a parent wants to request a local classroom review, they've already participated in the district wide request, so they would no longer be eligible for that particular school year. So just want to encourage us to think about the use cases and how we might be able to use the data from the local classroom reviews to help inform decisions moving forward in these particular use cases. Second thing is, how would the local classroom review be requested? So school districts can submit the TEA request form online and provide the assignments for review. So this is really, really important. This request is going to come straight from the district, and those requests can also begin on September 1, 2025. Also important to highlight here, how will the cost of the approved reviews be covered for districts? So we have grant funds that can be used to support district requested reviews. Obviously, with the earlier review requests having a higher likelihood of being funded, as the funding is not infinite, but the funding availability will depend on the volume of the local classroom review requests throughout the year. So once all of the funds have been spent, districts could continue, of course, to submit the requests. However, those review requests would then have to be covered with local funds. Lots to consider there, but just want to highlight here the ability of the school district to request a local classroom review. And then, as you can see, how would those results be reported? That would be reported in the form of a local classroom review report, and also sharing those results on the district website. So for the district requests for local classroom reviews, you can see that instead the catalyst here would be the submission of the request form to TEA from the district. And you can also see that we would be happy to conduct that review and just really understanding if you are using materials that have been used by IMRA. If you are not using materials that are approved by IMRA, then we would go ahead and really try to address those two questions for the local classroom review in terms of alignment of what is submitted to adopted materials, and also the ability to meet grade level rigor. And then you can see that if the materials were rejected by SBOE, that we would provide the IMRA report, as the quality of those materials has already been determined by SBOE. So lots to consider here with the district request. So really you're looking at the ability to work ahead, right? And really gain insight about the current implementation of the materials in your district, if that's something you'd like to consider. So for process requirement number 5, we really want to take a deep look at the LEA establishing a management process to track the requests and teacher participation in local classroom reviews. So this is really, really important because, as I mentioned, teachers are eligible one time per school year. So let's take a look at how we might be able to track teacher participation in local classroom reviews with these 3 things in mind. So the important considerations for the local classroom review is that we are, of course, trying to make sure that our teachers are engaged in the learning process with students as much as we can. And we want to minimize to the extent possible, the time a teacher is required to spend complying with a review under this section. And remember that what a teacher would be doing is assembling a week's worth of instructional materials and the blank student assignments. They would just be collecting what they've taught, and then the evaluation would be happening by the TEA certified reviewers. We also want to highlight that we do not want to authorize the review instructional materials used by a classroom teacher or a specific subject or grade level at a specific campus more than one time per year. But to do that, we have to keep track of who is participating in reviews so that we have a very clear picture district-wide of what teachers are participating in these reviews. So on screen, you can see an example of a sample teacher participation tracker where each elementary school, for instance, is listed there to the left, the teacher of record, listed to the right, the content area. And then they're also listing why or how that teacher participated. So the first teacher has participated in a parent-requested local classroom review. And maybe the second teacher has participated because your district is involved in, say, for instance, Texas Strategic Leadership or an ESF targeted diagnostics. So there are lots of different reviews that occur in the ecosystem. But remember that a teacher can participate one time per year. So let everyone sort of digest that on screen. And then it's also really important at the bottom of the screen to take a look that if a parent requests a local classroom review for a teacher who has already completed one, the district just provides a copy of that report for that teacher that was previously done. And so that's really, really key and critical as we're really paying attention to make sure that our teachers are participating one time per year in that specific grade level or subject. Okay, and finally, number 6, the process requirement number 6, really having our LEAs establish a process to be sure that once they get the results of the local classroom review and that report, that we have a way to share those results on the district website. And so what might that look like? A screenshot of the cover page of the local classroom review is on screen, and you can see that the report is going to detail the answer to the 2 questions, the extent to which the assignments meet grade level rigor, and do they align with what the district has adopted as their instructional materials. You can also see that the reports are going to include, and we'll unpack this a little bit more deeply in just a moment, the reports are also going to include the materials that were submitted for the local classroom review to be sure that we have maximum line of sight for parents in terms of what materials were being considered during those reviews. And then also, you can see lastly there on the 3rd bullet that the review reports should be published on the district website within 10 days of receiving the report. Really important just to keep transparency in mind here, as those are top of mind in the statutory language. Okay. So as we take a look at local classroom reviews, there's some specific components in this particular section that we want to engage with and make sure that we're unpacking more deeply. So back on screen, and I hope this looks familiar to you, we're back to chapter 31, and we're looking at number 1 and number 2, the 2 key questions we're trying to answer with local classroom reviews. So you might be wondering to yourself, how are we going to determine what the district adopted and if it matches what was submitted? So we're going to answer that question in this specific section. And then how are we going to determine if the assignment meets the level of rigor? And so we're going to take also a look more deeply in how we're going to make that determination with the SBOE approved rubrics. So on screen, you can see some of those, a summary of those takeaways for this particular section. So in number 1, we're going to use the certification of provision of instructional materials form to determine if what was submitted aligns with what you've adopted. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. In number 2, we're going to take a look at the local classroom review rubrics. Those rubrics are going to be leveraged to help us determine if the assignments are meeting grade level rigor. So number 3, we're going to take a look at the local classroom review score report, as it's going to have a standardized yes/no format for those 2 questions that we're going to seek to answer in the local classroom review. On number 4, we're going to take a look at the local classroom review appendix. And the appendix is going to play a big role because that's where the materials that were considered for the review, both scoreable and non-scoreable materials, will be organized. So we'll look at that as well. And then for number 5, really taking a closer look at what are going to be the scoreable materials in the local classroom review and what will be non-scoreable but included for parental transparency. Okay, so we're going to dive deeply into each one of these as we go through individually here. So we're going to begin with the certification and provision of instructional materials. As I mentioned before, we're going to use the certification of instructional materials form that our LEAs submit to TEA to determine if what was submitted for the local classroom review actually matches up and corresponds to what the district has adopted. And so you can see on screen, each district submits this to TEA annually, which is the certification and provision of instructional materials form for the 25-26 school year. Just a screenshot to remind us all what it looks like, and that we're submitting that to determine if what was submitted in the local classroom review actually corresponds to what you've adopted. You can see on screen as well that the TEAC certification, or pardon me, the certification of provision of instructional materials form really takes a look at the grade bands and subjects that we are attending to in the local classroom review for English language arts and math. Okay, so let's take a look at this question. So remember, question 1 on the local classroom review that we're seeking to answer is, does this assignment submitted for the local classroom review correspond to the materials adopted in the district? So on the left-hand side of the screen, you see an example of a blank student assignment that came in for mathematics, and you can see the assignment source is listed as Edmentum Study Island. On the right-hand side, you can see the math certification information submitted by the district for the 25-26 school year. And you can prominently see down there at the bottom that they have indeed adopted Edmentum Study Island for mathematics. And so when we're trying to answer the question, does the assignment submitted correspond to the materials adopted in the district? The answer in this case would be yes, and that's what would get reported. In another example, we ask the same question: does the assignment submitted correspond to the materials adopted in the district? And what you can see is that on the left-hand side, we have a blank student assignment that was submitted for the local classroom review, and it came from Splash Learn. And Splash Learn can't be found on the math certification information to the right-hand side. So in this particular case, when we're trying to answer the question, does the assignment submitted for the local classroom review correspond to materials, the answer would be no. And that is what would be reported. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2 for our specific component takeaways. And this one really features the local classroom review rubrics. So remember, these rubrics were approved by SBOE on April 11th, 2025. And these are what we are going to leverage to be able, our certified reviewers are going to leverage to determine if the assignments meet grade level rigor. And really remember that the rubrics are going to help us drive at the answer to question number 2, highlighted in orange on the screen. Just a reminder here that we can conduct a local classroom review in content areas and grade bands where we have an approved local classroom review rubric. And those are featured on screen. There are 4 rubrics that we have approved here in English language arts and math, and you can see the grade bands also listed on screen. Just a reminder. So let's dive into the example here. So remember, this drives at question number 2 for local classroom reviews. Does the assignment submitted for the local classroom review meet the level of the rigor for that particular grade level? So on the left-hand side, you can see the assignment that was submitted from Edmentum Study Island. It's a blank student assignment. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the SBOE approved rubric for mathematics K through 12, Our scorers will take that rubric and analyze the student assignment to determine if everything listed on the rubric there is determined to be in alignment with grade level rigor. And so you can see in this particular case, the answer to the question is yes. In a different example, so we have the same question. We're driving at number 2. Does the assignment submitted for the local classroom review meet the level of rigor for that grade level? On the left-hand side, you can see that the local classroom review, we have an assignment submitted to us from Worksheet Zone entitled All About Helicopters. And so our scorers are going to take the read comprehension rubric, grades 4 through 8, to the right-hand side and apply that and analyze that assignment to be able to answer the question. Does the assignment submitted for the local classroom review meet the level of rigor? In this case, the answer is no. All right, for the specific component number 3, this is really important. So the local classroom review report is going to be in a standardized yes/no format. So the report is going to answer the 2 questions that are central to the local classroom review. So let's take a look at the score report. And we want to make sure that we are very, very, very tightly connected and aligned to the components here, the 2 key questions of the local classroom review. So you can see on screen that the local classroom review summary will simply say yes, it does correspond to the instructional materials adopted by the district, or it will say no. You can also see that if it meets expectations for grade level rigor, it will either say yes or no. And so this format is for clarity to districts and parents who are engaging with this report. And you can see down below there, highlighted in blue, what the rigor review summary was by the scorer for the mathematics K through 12 rubric section. All right, and that brings us to the specific component of the local classroom review number 4. And that's going to be the local classroom review appendix. And the appendix is going to offer a lot of resources and details to help us comprehend the scope of the local classroom reviews. But I definitely want to name something for Appendix 1. So any of the documents that were submitted to the agency for the local classroom review will be linked to the documents submitted for the local classroom review in Appendix 1. We want to make sure that those materials are visible to the parents and that they have line of sight into a week's worth of instructional materials that students are engaging with, and that we have those materials organized into 2 groups, scorable and non-scorable materials, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So really important to highlight that Appendix 1 will have the materials that were submitted to the agency for the local classroom review. As I mentioned, that brings us to specific component number 5. And it really addresses or attends to how the materials will be organized. We're going to have scorable and non-scorable materials. And for those of you out there who work with us, we know that scorable materials in this particular case are going to be the blank student assignments, and non-scorable materials are going to be everything else. And so we're going to really take a look to make sure that those materials are organized into 1 of 2 categories so that we have maximum parental transparency. And so on screen, you can see how the local classroom review documents would be organized in appendix. And remember, we were just looking at Appendix 1. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the blank student assignment. So that is a scorable document. We would apply or leverage the SBOE approved rubric for mathematics to evaluate that assignment, and that would be scored. On the right-hand side of the screen is a non-scorable document, which would be the teacher guide that accompanied this particular assignment, for instance. And so we would not apply the rubric to any of the non-scorable materials, but we do want to include the teacher guide in the appendix as a non-scorable material so that that is visible to parents as they are requesting the local classroom review. Okay, so our key question for that section was, what are the specific components of the local classroom review? How will results be reported? And so back on screen is a summary of that section. Really taking a look at number one, to answer question number one of the local classroom reviews, we are going to use the certification and provision of instructional materials form. To answer question number two, for the local classroom reviews, we are going to leverage the SBOE approved rubrics in that particular grade band and content area to determine grade level rigor. Then number three, we took a look at the local classroom review score report as it reports yes or no, directly answering the two questions that the local classroom review seeks to report on. Then we talked a little bit about the appendix and why that's important, because we want to make sure that we have a full line of sight for parents into what materials were considered for the local classroom review and what a week's worth of instructional materials may look like in that specific classroom. And then number five, how we're going to organize that appendix into scorable and non-scorable materials. So blank student assignments being the scorable materials and everything else being the non-scorable materials. Okay, for the next section, once I approve a local classroom review, how do I submit a request to TEA if I'm a district? So I think it's really important. On screen, you have a summary of the process. So if your district has approved a local review request, that's step one. And then step two would be that the district would submit the local review request form to TEA via an online form. So that is the district submitting to TEA. Then in step three, the assignments that you submit to us are going to be scored by two certified ESC reviewers in a blind scoring process. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. In step four, the local classroom review report will be sent back to the LEA after it is finalized. And then step five, the local classroom review report should be published on the district website within 10 days of receiving the report. So what we're going to do is unpack each step a little bit more deeply. That was an overview. So let's take a look at step two. So in step one, I've already approved the request. I've approved a parent request. So I'm getting ready to submit the local review request form to TEA via an online form. So you see a screenshot of that form on the left-hand side. And then to the right-hand side, you see what information you're going to need to gather to complete the form. Most of it should be pretty straightforward, but just want to highlight there. That way, when you get to the form, you have all your materials gathered just to help with efficiency. But you can see we're really looking for your CDN number. Who initiated the request? Is this a district request? Is this an individual parent? Is this an approved petition? Just tell us more about who's initiating it. The subject area and grade level, the publisher of the materials, and the ISBN number for the source of those materials. So that's really the first part of the form. I say pretty straightforward. The second part of the form is going to be where you're going to actually submit the documents to us so we can analyze them. So submission number one, as you can see on screen, you want to have all your blank student assignments, your scorable materials in one file, and you're going to upload them to the form. And so whatever blank student assignments or scorable materials you want considered for your request, we want to make sure that that happens in submission one. In submission 2, because remember, you're collecting other instructional materials for a week's worth of learning, and those are non-scorable, you would actually in a PDF file or in one file, get all of those other instructional materials in one file and submit for submission number 2. And that can include content resources, instructional guides, bell ringers, exit tickets, etc. Also, on the final bullet there, just a reminder that the local classroom review request form is going to be given to the superintendent and a designee in each district. This won't be a publicly available form because the district will submit directly to TEA for a district-wide local classroom review request. The district is going to submit directly to TEA if there's an approved parent request. So this particular request form for local classroom review, like I say, will be shared with the superintendent and a designee in each district and won't be publicly available. We want to make sure that all approved requests have gone through you and that you are very aware about the assignments being considered, etc. Okay, for step 3, how are the assignments going to be scored? And the short answer is TEA certified reviewers are going to score the assignment submission. But I included a few details here just to help LEAs understand how they're going to be considered. So please keep in mind that all of our TEA certified reviewers have to be certified in the area that they wish to be reviewed. Also, all of our reviewers have to complete 3 TEA training sessions to become a certified reviewer, and that includes passing a performance task to become a TEA certified reviewer. The other thing to consider is that each assignment collection that you submit to us is going to be scored by 2 certified reviewers. We want to make sure we have clear and consistent scoring, and we want to make sure that you have results that you can work with and communicate with your stakeholders. So each assignment collection would be assigned to 2 certified reviewers. Also important to mention that this is going to be a blind scoring process. So our reviewers will not know what district or campus these assignments are coming from. They're going to simply be engaging with the assignments, leveraging the SBOE approved rubrics to render the score on the assignment. So we think that's really important for LEAs to know as well. And then also I would name that our certified reviewers have in the report an option to include summary statements in the report to help describe the assignment submission, which will be helpful to explain how they arrived at the score. So super important, just some reminders here about how our certified reviewers will engage with the assignments that you submit to us. Okay, so on screen in step number 4, you see that once the reviewers engage with your assignment, what you submitted to us, our assignment collection, you will get a report. You see 2 screenshots here on what that report could look like. And so you see the direct answer to the 2 questions on the report in the local classroom review summary. Then you can also see the mathematics K through 12 bolded in blue down there on the left-hand side about did it receive a yes for TEKS alignment. It received a no for depth and coherence according to the rubric. It received a yes on balance, conceptual and procedural understanding, and a yes on productive struggle. The other areas are grayed out. For this particular review, ELR assignments were not considered. And then you can see to the right-hand side those summary statements that I was referring to help districts and parents understand the rationale for the scoring at the bottom of the report on the right-hand side. Okay, and so lastly, the districts, once they get the report back, that the report should be published on the district website within 10 days of receiving the report. Just want to highlight here for our LEA partners that each report is going to have a unique ID. So if there are questions that are surfacing at your LEA on that particular report or something that you have a question about, you would be able to use that unique ID number to contact us and ask your question about that specific report. Also want to mention here that the local classroom review report does not have specific teacher or student information on it. And we want to make sure that we are keeping the privacy of our teachers and students here at the forefront. Okay, so our key question for this section is, what is the process that school districts should use to formally request a local classroom review from the Texas Education Agency? And here is the answer, circling back again to the process for districts to submit a request to us via an online form. All right, so let's talk lastly about funding for the local classroom reviews. I think it's really important to name two things here. Number one, that parent requests that are approved by the school district, because remember, you're approving the parent requests. We're going to prioritize those and conduct those at no cost to parents, and we're going to fund those through a grant for local classroom reviews. So that's the first part. The second thing to keep in mind is that grant funds will also be used to support district requested reviews. Please keep in mind that early requests have a higher likelihood of being funded. The funding availability is really going to depend on the volume statewide for local classroom review requests. And then once all the grant funds have been spent, districts may choose to use local funds for any other requests. All right. So we have spent some time together engaging about local classroom reviews, but we do want to provide some additional information. On screen, you can see that there was a TEA to the administrator address correspondence dated on May 29th, 2025, where you can find some more information about local classroom reviews. You can also access the TEA superintendent call on May 29th, 2025, which features some slides regarding the local classroom review. And then lastly, we'd encourage you to engage with the local classroom review webpage, as we're going to periodically update it to reflect some of the things and questions that are surfacing as we go throughout the fall semester. And of course, we are happy to help and support you. If you have questions, please do send us an email at the local classroom reviews at tea.texas.gov so that we can answer your specific question and make sure that you have the information you need to operationalize local classroom reviews in your district for the 25-26 school year. We are so grateful for your engagement in the overview for local classroom reviews, and we also want to thank you for all that you do to support students each and every day in the classroom.